At my sister's wedding, I found my seat shoved in a distant corner, a wobbly folding chair with a scrap of paper taped to it labeled extra. My cousin leaned close and muttered, "They didn't think you'd actually come." I forced a tight smile, walked to the gift table, fished out the $6,000 check I'd tucked into their card and said, "Guess I'm too much for this." As I turned to leave, my uncle followed. Hesitant, my mom called out, "Stop him!" But I kept moving. I didn't look back. It was the most crushing moment of my life. Not the kind you laugh off later, like misnaming someone in a text or waving at a stranger you thought you knew. No, this was deeper. This was a wound that festers, heavier than anger. It was the moment everything I'd ignored about my family snapped into focus. It happened at my sister Leela's wedding, my only sibling. We were close as kids, or so I believed. But after our parents started favoring her, especially after my wife Sarah and I got married and learned we couldn't have children, things shifted. Their behavior toward us changed, subtle at first. Fewer calls, awkward silences at family dinners, questions that felt like accusations. "Still nothing, tried everything, maybe you're too stressed." Sarah hated it. I told her it would pass, that they were just dealing with their own disappointment. I defended them more than I should have. The wedding invite came 3 weeks before the day, after months of silence. Not a phone call. Not even a personal message, just a group text. "Hey Ryan, you and Sarah can come now, some people canceled." The word "now" stung like we were an afterthought. Sarah read it and asked, "You sure about this?" I said we should go. I wanted to believe it was sincere, even if half-hearted. The oddest part? We'd already sent Leela and her fiancé $2,000 to help with expenses. She'd called me 6 months earlier, frantic, saying they were short on funds for flowers and decor. I wired the money that night. No thank you, no follow-up. I let it go. I thought that's what family does. We arrived at the venue early. It was small, about 30 guests, mostly relatives and a few of Leela's friends I'd seen on social media but never met. Sarah held my arm as we walked in. She was quiet, observant. She always notices things before I do. We checked the seating chart at the entrance. No Ryan, no Sarah, just a scrawled note at the bottom in messy ink. "Extra seats in corner." We followed the direction. There it was. One flimsy chair, not even two. A single metal seat with a note screaming "extra" in bold, underlined marker like they wanted me to feel it. I stood there, trying to process it. That's when my cousin Ethan leaned in and whispered, "They didn't expect you to show." That cut deeper than I anticipated, not because it surprised me, but because it confirmed what I'd feared. Sarah looked at me. I said nothing. I walked past the chair, through the crowd, to the gift table. I knew exactly where our card was. I'd placed it there when we arrived. A simple envelope with "To Leela and James" in Sarah's careful handwriting. I pulled it out, slid the $6,000 check partway out, letting the amount catch the light. A few heads turned. Ethan's jaw dropped. Murmurs started. I didn't care anymore. $6,000 on top of the $2,000 we'd already given. For a wedding that cost $7,500 total. They didn't just forget me. They used me. So I said evenly, like stating a fact, "Guess I'm too much for this." And I walked away, not storming out, not making a scene, just leaving. Sarah followed without hesitation. My uncle called after me. My mom shouted, "Stop him!" But no one moved. No one stopped me. They didn't really want me there in the first place. We got in the car. Sarah was silent for a moment, then said, "I tried to warn you." I nodded. That was all I could manage. We didn't drive home. We went to a quiet diner on the edge of town and sat in silence, not hungry, just needing a place to breathe. I kept replaying it, wondering if I'd done the right thing, if I'd made a mistake. But I hadn't. The real mistake was years ago, when I kept trying to win over people who saw me as a flaw in their perfect family portrait. This time I chose myself, but walking away was just the beginning. The real storm hit the next morning, and it didn't come from Leela. It came from everyone else. The next morning, the house felt too quiet. Not peaceful, but heavy. Sarah was in the kitchen, coffee in one hand, phone in the other, staring at something with that look she gets before tossing her phone aside. I didn't ask. She just showed me the screen. A text from my mom, cold and formal, the kind of tone only family can use when they're pretending they're not furious. It started with, "I think there was a misunderstanding," which would have been funny if it wasn't so painful. Then the guilt trip. Leela was heartbroken. She cried all night. You humiliated her on her big day. You humiliated us all. I stood there rereading it, hoping I'd missed something. I hadn't. It was all there, denial, blame, manipulation. Before I could process it, my phone buzzed. Leela. A missed call, then a text. "You ruined everything." 3 minutes later. "You're pathetic." No context, no explanation, just that. Like I was the one who turned her wedding into a spectacle, like I hadn't been pushed into a corner like an unwanted guest. By 11 a.m. the doorbell rang. Sarah answered, still in her pajamas, no makeup, hair tied back, unbothered. My mom stood there, holding a grocery bag like she was stopping by for a casual visit. Sarah didn't step aside. "I need to talk to Ryan." "No, you don't. It's important. It should have been important yesterday." I stayed in the hallway listening. Sarah wasn't angry, she was done. There's a difference. My mom tried again, raising her voice, asking if I was home. I didn't answer. I let Sarah close the door in her face. 30 minutes later, Leela showed up, no groceries. Just raw fury and a glare she'd probably rehearsed on the drive over. Sarah cut her off before she could finish her first sentence, saying we weren't interested. Leela raised her voice. Sarah met it with the weight of her silence. She stood there until Leela turned and stormed back to her car, shoulders rigid, head shaking like she couldn't believe we weren't giving in like always. Then the real chaos started. First the uncles, then the cousins. Then an aunt I hadn't spoken to since my grandfather's funeral called to say, I heard what happened. I'm shocked. Everyone was shocked. Everyone had something to say, but none of them spoke up when Leela sent that group text. None of them cared when we were uninvited. Not one of them flinched when we were asked to fund a wedding we weren't welcome at. Now they all wanted to play mediator. One uncle even said, it's just a chair. Like a chair with a note wasn't the final straw in a pile I'd been stacking for years. Sarah didn't waste time. She started blocking numbers mid-call. She logged into my social media and deleted my profiles. I didn't stop her. She handed me my phone and said, you don't need this mess anymore. I hesitated, not because I disagreed, but because this was all I'd ever known. This endless pursuit of approval from people who barely saw me as family. Sarah saw it years ago. She warned me. She tried to show me that love shouldn't feel like begging. 2 days after the wedding, Sarah called Leela. I didn't know what she'd say. I thought she might try to smooth things over. I sat on the couch, listening from the next room. The call lasted maybe 3 minutes. Leela's voice came through loud, even with the phone to Sarah's ear. She was yelling, throwing words like selfish and spiteful. Sarah didn't raise her voice. She just waited. When Leela paused to breathe, Sarah said something quietly and hung up. She walked in, tossed the phone on the table and said, that's the last we'll hear from her. What did you say? I told her if she comes here again, she'll regret it. I stared at her. Sarah's not cruel. She's not dramatic. She's kind, strong, but something in her had snapped, not in a bad way, just in a final way. You don't have to protect me, I said. I'm not, she replied. I'm protecting us. And I'm done letting people ruin our peace. That hit hardest. Because for the first time, I saw it clearly. I've been trying so hard to be accepted by a family that would never see me as enough. Sarah saw it years before I did. And now she wasn't waiting for me to catch up. She was done. And whether I was ready or not, that meant I had to be too. The next few days felt like moving through fog. I kept expecting another knock, another text, another wave of guilt dressed as concern. But after Sarah's call to Leela, everything went quiet. Not peaceful quiet, the kind before a storm. On the third day, they tried again. This time, my mom and Leela showed up together just before noon. Sarah and I had just finished lunch. We saw them pull up from the kitchen window. My mom's SUV parked crooked in the driveway, Leela in the passenger seat, already bracing for whatever drama she'd planned. Sarah didn't flinch. She walked to the door before they could ring the bell, stepped outside, and closed it behind her. I stood in the hallway, watching through the window. My mom did most of the talking, arms flailing, voice rising. Leela stood back, arms crossed. I couldn't hear everything, but I caught fragments. Family, apology, money. Sarah didn't budge, didn't say much until she did. She stepped closer, pointed at the driveway, and turned her back. They didn't expect that. Leela shouted something. I couldn't hear it, but Sarah didn't turn around. She came back inside, calm as if she'd just checked the mail. I told them if they come back, I'll file a restraining order, she said, pouring a glass of water like it was nothing. I'm not joking, Ryan. I won't live like this. I didn't know what to say. She wasn't asking for permission or support. She was drawing a line and daring anyone to cross it. And that's when something shifted in me too. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't sad. I was drained. Drained from apologizing for being the son who didn't give them grandkids. Drained from trying to earn a place in a family that saw me as flawed. Drained from pretending love was owed just because we shared blood. That night, Sarah surprised me again. She sat me down, opened her laptop, and showed me the wedding budget Leela had emailed months ago when she asked for help. $7,500 total. My name and the $2,000 I'd sent were still listed under decor contributions. She didn't even remove us after uninviting us, Sarah said. Then she opened her own spreadsheet. I didn't know she kept one. It tracked every expense we'd covered for my family, trips, gifts, loans we never got back. Thousands of dollars over the years, all of it me trying to prove something. She never cared, Sarah said. None of them did. You're not the problem, Ryan, they are. Something loosened inside me. Then Sarah smiled, not warmly but sharply. I'm done playing defense, she said. Now it's my turn. I didn't get it at first, but the next morning I would. Because Sarah had a plan, and once she set it in motion, there was no turning back. The next morning, everything felt too still, like the world was holding its breath. Sarah was at the kitchen table, laptop open, a notepad beside her with names, dates, and lines connecting them. She didn't look up when I walked in, just tapped her pen and said, "She's more dishonest than I thought." Who? I asked, already knowing. Leela, she's been lying to everyone, not just us. She turned the laptop toward me. An old Instagram post from Leela, months before the wedding, bragging about how a charity she worked with helped fund her wedding through a grant. The comments were full of admiration. "So proud. You deserve this." She told everyone that's where the money came from, Sarah said, but this charity never listed her in their donation records, so I called them. "You called?" "Yup, spoke to their director. They've never heard of her, never funded a wedding, and definitely didn't give her a grant." I sat down, staring at the screen. "So she lied for clout?" "No," Sarah said, tapping her pen. "She lied to erase us." That hit differently. Because it was true. No mention, no thank you, not even a nod. Leela had built a narrative where Sarah and I didn't exist, and she'd been feeding it to others too. Then Sarah opened another file. The budget Leela sent when she asked for help. $7,500 total. Our $2,000 was listed under decor and venue support. Our names were still there. Proof. Sarah had also gathered screenshots, receipts, and a copy of the cleared $6,000 check I'd taken back. She told James it didn't clear, Sarah said. "What?" "Yeah, that's why I'm calling him." She dialed before I could say anything. "Put it on speaker." James answered after 2 rings. "Hey, Sarah." "Hi, James. Just a heads up, we're preparing a statement. Since Leela claimed her wedding was funded by a charity and they confirmed they never gave her anything, we might need to clarify our financial role. Legally, if it comes to that." Silence. "Then she told me your check bounced." Sarah replied calmly, "We have the bank records, it cleared in 24 hours, she lied." Click, he hung up. We sat there not speaking. Sarah broke the silence. "She's built her whole image on being better than everyone else. Even when she needed help, she had to pretend it came from anywhere but you." That night, Sarah sent a message, not to Leela, but to my mom. Short, sharp, final. "You let her treat us like garbage and you stood by. Don't come back, don't call, don't drag Ryan into your chaos. We're done cleaning it up." No reply. But the next morning, Leela's social media vanished. Facebook gone, Instagram wiped. By noon, we got an email from James. "It's handled, please don't contact us again." That could have been the end, but Sarah wasn't done. Later that day, I found her at the table, sorting through a folder of old texts, letters, even holiday cards. "What are you doing?" "Finishing it." I laughed nervously. "You said we're done." She looked up calm, focused. "No, I said they're done. We're just getting started." I didn't understand at first. She wasn't yelling, wasn't pacing, just methodical, almost clinical. She'd collected every piece of communication from the past few years. Birthday texts that only came after we sent gifts. Thank yous that never really thanked. Messages that were subtle jabs dressed as small talk. Sarah printed them all. She sat on the living room floor, organizing it like evidence for a trial. And that's what it was. The next morning, she emailed my mom. I didn't ask what it was, but I saw the subject. "Everything you chose to ignore." An hour later, my phone rang. I didn't answer. 10 minutes later, the doorbell rang. Sarah started to get up, but I stopped her. "I'll handle it," I said. It was my mom, eyes swollen. She started talking the second I opened the door, but I cut her off. "Don't," I said. "Just don't." She wasn't expecting that. She opened her mouth, ready with another excuse. I closed the door before she could speak. Later, Sarah told me what she'd sent. A collection of years of what she called quiet disrespect. Every time they acted like I didn't matter, like Sarah wasn't my wife, like our life was less because we didn't have a child. She included the group text that invited us to Leela's wedding like an afterthought. Every slight, every dismissal, laid out clearly. But that wasn't all, because Leela had used part of the wedding funds to pay off a credit card she'd been hiding from James. Sarah found the receipts. One of Leela's friends, someone Sarah met once at a party, sent her screenshots from a group chat where Leela bragged about how gullible we were for giving her so much. It was vicious. Sarah printed those too and mailed them to James with a note. "In case you're still unsure who you married." That was when everything went truly silent. No more calls, no more texts. Even the family group chat we were never part of shut down. Ethan told me. He said everyone was panicking, trying to figure out how much James knew, how much Sarah and I had. Sarah wasn't out to destroy anyone. That's what surprised me most. She just wanted them to leave us alone, and now they were. "Think that was too far?" she asked that night on the porch. I thought about it, thought about the years I spent chasing acceptance. The chair in the corner, the note, the silence when we needed support, the noise when we finally said no. "No," I said. "You stopped waiting for me to stand up for myself." She didn't smile. She didn't need to. But deep down, we both knew one thing was left unsaid. It came on a Wednesday mid-afternoon, a plain envelope in the mailbox. No return address, just my name in Leela's neat, precise handwriting. I knew it was her before I touched it. I held it, then tossed it on the counter. 2 days later, Sarah said, "You don't have to read it, but don't let it sit in our home." She was right, so I opened it. It wasn't an apology, not even close. It started with a half-hearted attempt at reflection. Something about misunderstandings and tense emotions. But her real voice came through soon enough. She blamed me for ruining her big day. Said James was humiliated, that our mom hadn't slept properly in days because of the stress I'd caused. Then this line, "You've always been bitter about not having a real family and now you're trying to tear ours apart." I held the letter, letting the words settle. Then I smiled. Not because it was funny, but because it was the clearest proof I'd made the right choice walking away. Sarah came in, saw the letter in my hand, and asked, "Worth reading?" "No," I said, folding it. "But worth remembering." She didn't ask what it said. She didn't need to. She pulled the trash can over and I dropped it in. We sat on the porch that night, watching the wind move the trees, the quiet wrapping us like a soft blanket. I looked at the street, at the spot where my mom and Leela had stood, demanding apologies they didn't deserve. "I don't think I'll ever go back," I said. "Even if they beg, even if they mean it someday." Sarah was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Good, they never lost you. You were never theirs to begin with." That was the final piece, the last thing I needed to hear. The months that followed felt strange at first, peaceful but strange. I'd spent so long reacting, explaining, hoping for scraps of love that felt like tolerance. When the noise stopped, it was like a machine I hadn't noticed shut off after years of running. The holidays passed with no invites, just a few passive-aggressive texts from unknown numbers, a generic birthday card signed from all of us with no names. I didn't respond. Neither did Sarah. Ethan texted once in January. "Leela's trying to patch things up, but only with people she can still control." That told me everything. Sarah and I started taking weekend trips. Nothing fancy, just drives out of town to places we'd never made time for. We picked up old hobbies, slept in, laughed more. It was a quiet joy, no performance, no approval needed. One Sunday, over coffee by the window, Sarah said, "You've been lighter lately." I didn't reply right away, but she was right. I'd finally stopped trying to convince people who didn't want to understand me. I'd stopped begging for a place in a family that treated me like an afterthought. Let them move on without me. And they did. But I didn't leave empty-handed. I walked away with one person who never asked me to prove anything, who stood between me and the storm when no one else saw I was drowning. For the first time, I wasn't trying to belong. I already did. So what do you think of this story? Do you agree with what happened, or do you see it differently? Share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear your perspective. If you enjoyed this story, give it a like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you don't miss our next one. See you soon.